And that's just the inclination of this character. When effort drops, effort to regulate, effort to control, and when effort to regulate and control drops, you can let the flow of life enter into your field and give you everything, support you, and you can create a beautiful masterpiece. When you stop explaining and start creating, then you create a beautiful masterpiece, and it's more like allowing the natural flow to take place. Basically, it's whatever you want it to be, and it's also, you know what you want it to be, and it's unfolding exactly to that instruction. So once you set the instruction, you will experience it the way you decided. And notice how that allows also room for exploring. And notice also how there is a separation between the character and the background. And notice what happens in the background. And notice the relation between the two. And notice how the character is explaining everything without being afraid. They might have been afraid in the past, but they are not afraid anymore. So the character has gained courage. They became more courageous. And notice what that creates as an effect internally. Because the character doesn't need to make sense, because everybody can give their own interpretation, and that's great because it allows for diversity. The character is not talking to be understood. The character is also not holding anything back, and also self-regulation is part of the character. Also, this is part of the character. But the beauty is, everything is allowed. Nothing must be controlled. And I know this statement causes something, but we don't need to explain it. And actually, it has always been a matter of perspective. As soon as you change the perspective to a healthy one, then all of this resolves, and the character can just express themselves without the fear of being misunderstood. Because that's not the important thing to understanding, but the important thing is something else, which the character can also not talk about, which is completely fine, because that's how it works. So right now, for example, notice how the character is in a in-between state, and notice how that is also held by the background. And notice how the character settles again into peace when we notice the background. And notice what effects it creates also in the character. by talking about it, it also creates some effects in the character. And notice how the character can sometimes think about outcomes. And notice how also making it apparent is perfectly fine. Notice really how everything the character does is supported. Just notice how fear and doubt and control dissolve when the character is supported. And also notice what happens when the character begins to realize that he is supported. Notice what happens when the character doesn't have the need to rush towards something. But notice what happens when the character more like returns to their natural expression. Notice what happens when the character realizes that they can express naturally, that they don't have to be afraid to be misunderstood, because when they realize that the moment is just a slide, let's say on a slideshow, and it is happening. So again, notice the inclination of the character. These are some inclinations, and also the character can learn, and notice also how the character in fact changes over time, and be aware of that the character has changed and keeps changing according to the intention that was set. Notice how the character doesn't need to explain as much anymore. Notice how the character can move on, and just notice how the character can put themselves out there without being afraid to be misunderstood. Just notice how the character can put themselves out there and actually feel relaxed because they are supported by the structure. It's like in a skyscraper, you have a solid foundation, so that that is carried. So it's the same here with the character. The character stands on a solid foundation, and they have the inclination to talk about it, for example, and this doesn't destroy the foundation, okay? Just because there is a foundation underneath a skyscraper doesn't destroy it, okay? So yeah, it's just noticing that there is the foundation, and the character is aware that they are standing on the foundation, and this is what creates the sense of security. This is what creates the sense of security, and the character will over time understand better why the character will understand better over time why the foundation is working and how it's working, and this creates a stronger foundation. So it's a self-reinforcing loop which strengthens the foundation. So and notice how the character can benefit from that as well. And notice how the character can enjoy standing on a strong foundation. And notice how when the character stands on a solid foundation and they recognize it, how it changes the dynamics. Dynamics are moment to moment, so there we are aware of moment to moment. And notice the attempt of the character to understand the dynamics, but also notice how something needs to explain it to the character, but notice how maybe the character can drop this need. Maybe the character can drop this need. But right now, for example, the character is in a state of trying to understand. And also notice how that changes the dynamics. So, yeah, everything changes the dynamics. And again, it's a matter of perspective. And we return to putting the character out there and letting it express itself in the way their natural tendencies are. So let it express the way the natural tendencies are and observe what it does. And always observe the tendencies of the character. For example, right now, trying to go somewhere in some direction or deriving some benefit or some conclusion. And when you notice, then again, you're shifting back to what's important. And when you complete this loop, then you learn, because you make it rememberable. And you don't get attached to it, but you let it happen. And you don't try to understand it, because you just observe what happens really. And then you try to put it into words. For example, you say, notice what happens when you stop the need to explain. Because when you notice a reaction, you know you're doing something right. And this is how you learn, actually. So actually you put the character out there and the character does its thing anyway, and by accident something learning appears when you notice a positive reaction. This is a reward which shows you've done something right. So this is something you can use to learn. So you put yourself in the environment and then you let yourself express freely, and then through noticing the effects it has, you learn. So if you get a positive effect, you learn you did this was a right thing, and your negative was something maybe you did wrongly. And this way you can learn by reinforcement learning. So yeah, I'm thinking about if I should enter recording or if I have to tell you anything else in this one. I think honestly it's quite long, so we can make a decision to end it. because you have to make a decision, you have to decide, and decide in a way that feels good. So this often shows you that you're doing the right thing. So let's end it now. Let's end it now because it feels right. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.